Hello, Leslie. Good morning.
Hey, Christina, how are you?
I'm good. I got some sinus allergy stuff. It's just acting
I
up
think
this
it's the
morning.
season for allergies, lots of stuff in the air.
Well, we're here in Vegas. So, of course, in Las Vegas, we have a year round growing season, right? That's one thing. And then the second thing is that we love to decorate all of our ornamentals and everything, and nothing is from here. There are no few rare endemic plants. So they bring everything in. It's super
Yeah,
dry, dries out your sinuses. And a lot of people, like after you've lived here for a bit, you develop allergies. And I think that's what's
yeah.
happening right now with me.
Same thing with Austin, where I live. Yeah,
Oh,
same thing.
right. It's even
Yeah,
better there actually because you get all the humidity. So then you get lots of plants that grow. Everything grows there.
well, it also dies in the winter when it
Mm,
gets below freezing.
mm.
So,
Oh, yeah,
we
that's
have a
true.
we
That's
have a
true.
different deal.
So, wanted to talk about changes
Yeah,
today.
dealing with change.
How change happens, how big changes happen, sudden big ones, and then also when you're at work, small incremental changes and how
Right,
that
right,
happens.
and how
I
to
had a
deal with
graph.
them. I
I'm trying to think. There was a graph that was. Have you ever seen this one? Like the early adoption, how it
oh, the chasm,
happens.
crossing the chasm, get graph.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's right.
yeah,
And
right.
then there's a big
It's
early adopter, then the
right.
next people, and it kind of plateaus, and then finally everyone kind of adopts, and then it
Right.
falls down. Yeah.
Yeah. So yesterday I was at an event where three CIOs were talking about the use of AI
Oh.
in their business. It was very interesting.
Uh-huh.
And each one of them thought that AI was a very new development, very recent. And I'm thinking, huh? We've been working, we software engineers have been working on this thing for a long time.
Right, right,
And
right.
in fact, way, 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 way back to, some early times, probably in the 60s and 70s when it was talked about, but
Yeah.
not really much was done. But in the 80s, a lot started getting done.
Yeah.
And a lot of work has been going into making artificial intelligence a reality for 40 years.
Mm,
And these guys, they were the CIOs, they weren't, tech historians, but
right.
they seem to think that AI was a very new thing and
Hmm.
had just been around for a couple of years.
And just we woke up one day and just poof, chat
Yeah, boom.
GPT. It's a generative AI. Suddenly we have
And
agents.
And here's what it made me think about in terms of change. That was a little bit talk of things have changed and we have this new thing. So the same might well have been true, and yeah, I think the same is true for when the internet became popular, and that was with the onset or the adoption of the World Wide Web. Before
Mm,
that, it was DARPANET and ARPANET,
right.
and uh, and it was also called the internet. But in those days, there wasn't an easy user interface, and so most people didn't know about it.
Mm,
And I do remember something sort of humorous to me. I was a computer science student during part of that time, and so I used it. But one person I remember had put in a note that there was a house for rent in the Bay Area, and that person got so flamed
yeah.
for using it for commercial purposes.
Oh, interesting.
It was it was not to be used for commercial purposes. It
Right.
was just for research.
Research, right? Yeah. Sharing information.
So then we had, the invention of the web and a user interface that made it quite possible for people to use it. And then people began using the web, but they thought that this was a brand new thing.
Mm,
And so when the mass public learns about a change, they think it's brand new. And they don't know that years and years of work have gone in behind it to make it possible.
yeah.
Mm. So then you have your early adopters
Right. When we're
who
talking
are,
about the graph, uh,
yeah.
they're usually the young people. The young
Hmm.
people drive that innovation. My friend Heather Downing does a talk about um, how the sex industry actually is often
Yes.
the leader in technical innovation.
Yes,
They're
that's
usually the
very
early
true because
adopters.
they're pushing the
Yeah.
boundaries of that. Yep.
Hmm.
And then the other industry that is often uh, pushing the new innovation is the defense industry.
Oh, right.
They
Hmm.
want these new tools, and
Yeah.
s- in fact, that's where DARPANET, Defense
Right.
Agency Research Project, something like that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, oops, sorry. Have to turn that off. Um, different industries drive it. As a young software engineer, I was always shocked
Yeah.
that the sex industry would drive technology, and I was shocked that uh, entertainment would
Oh,
drive
right.
technology. Both of those seemed odd to
They
me,
want
but
faster cameras. They want cameras that can move in one shot. They
yeah,
want
and
higher
games. I mean,
resolution.
I, I didn't see any need for games, so
Oh, uh-huh. Uh-huh. You
So how
know,
do people deal with this change? Let me turn that to you.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
how do people deal with the changes that they experience?
You know, it's a wide range, and we've worked with that wide range of people. It usually is the early adopters. You know, they're all in. There's a small percentage over here, the people who are so much more um, wanting to have less risk, which is your field of expertise, right? Less risk. How can we manage? How can we make calculated risks? Most of us are right here in the middle, though. Most of us are in this gray area when we start talking about how we adapt to change. And there are two schools of thought. Then there are the people who believe we should just rip off the band-aid really, really fast, make the big change really fast, and just go for it. um, and then there are people who think small incremental changes are how change should be made. I'm of the school of thought about small incremental changes because I like to make sure that you're getting data from everyone. And so I'm probably I
Hmm.
wouldn't say I'm an early adopter. I wouldn't say I'm someone down here. I'm not really a Luddite, right? But I am a little bit higher on the scale, closer to the early adopters. And I think that as change happens, usually what happens is it's not even on our radar and we're not even thinking about it. And so something will come in, it'll influence us, and we'll go, "Oh, maybe I could accept that. I can accept that behavior. I can accept that new policy. I can accept that new direction in the change of the scope of work for our project, whatever that is. Maybe I can." There's that consideration phase, right? And we kind of think about this also when we talk about how in marketing and in sales, people go through the sales cycle. So first they're like, it's not even on my radar. Then they're like, oh, maybe, okay. We move up to step two. Yeah, I can maybe consider this. Then we go into step three, which is where we're researching. Hey, let me learn more about this. Let me, if it's a policy change, let's talk to our team leader. Let's talk to my manager. How is this going to affect me? How is this going to affect our team? How is our project going to be affected? What direction it is going to happen with this new OSS project? Because suddenly the open source software like AutoMapper or Media TR or Mass Transit. I think those are the latest three who just announced that they're going to go commercial. um, how is this going to affect my projects and my company and our business model, right? And then they start researching, asking questions, gathering data. And then this is where decision making happens. The next step after that is where people go, yes, I'm on board. I've gathered all the information that I need to make a decision. Or people go, you know what? I've gathered all the information I need to make a decision, and it's going to be a no. I refuse, right? I'm not going back into the office. Maybe there's a new
Yeah.
workplace policy about that, right? I mean, I had friends who during the pandemic bought a house 2.5 hours out of the city, and they've been working remotely. They were hired remotely 5, 6, 7 years, and then suddenly, oh, everybody back to the office. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to uproot your family 2.5 hours away. It's sometimes it's a big strong no. But with even with the sales process with buyers, that's the point that they decide, okay, I'm going to sign the contract. All right, we're going to do this partnership. Okay, I'm going to sponsor your event, whatever that is. And then after that is the adoption of the innovation, the new change, the adoption of the the thing that I'm going to incorporate into my life, because even that takes some integration into the workflow, into the new way of working, into the new, bringing folding the new into the old technology,
Yeah.
however that's going to work. And then finally is it's the follow up. How is everything working? The assessment. Is everything okay? What changes can we make? Is this sustainable? And then there's the follow up to the follow up, I always add, because we're notoriously bad at the first follow up. So if we know that there's a follow up to the follow up coming, then that means the first follow up is definitely going to happen. And then the follow up to the follow up, that might fall by the wayside. But I always tell people at least have a follow up to the follow up, and then the iteration process happens. How do
Yeah.
we improve it? So that's the process of change, and it's very similar to the sales process as well in the sales cycle, when we're talking about marketing.
Yeah.
When it's a business culture, again, like I'm a big fan of small incremental changes because that's how the sustainable changes happen. What we know is that most of us right here, despite the early adopters in this early side, most of us in the gray area and in the risk averse area, they want to go through that entire process on their own time, and different people have different ways of processing those different stages, right?
Yeah.
And most of us don't just dive in head first like the early adopters. So I'm a big fan of gradually making a change, stepping everyone through that process, getting the feedback, following up to the feedback, and then going, all right, how are we going to assess this and improve it? How
Yeah.
about
And
for you?
I think that when you're talking about these changes, people, people get they're sort of. I remember just as a young software engineer, I would be dealing with changes in operating systems because
Oh, right.
our operating systems would change really quickly, pretty often, like at least once every year, but a little bit more than that. And every time I changed operating systems, it slowed me down quite a bit. I lost productivity,
Yeah.
uh, and and as I've mentioned in other talks, when you're dealing with change, it slows you down, dilutes your productivity a while, and then sometimes people get very resistant to that change
Yeah.
and they don't like it. They
They
were
don't
much
want
more
to adopt
comfortable
it.
doing,
Maybe they
yeah,
don't have enough information yet.
they
Maybe,
were comfortable the way they were doing things, and now
yeah,
they're uncomfortable.
yeah.
And that is just magnified when there's chaos.
Hmm.
And I have to say, right now, there's a lot of chaos in the geopolitical systems of the
Hmm.
world. We have a lot of chaos. And so changes become much harder to deal with. You know, you feel like you're getting flapped around in the
Yeah,
wind like a sheet
yeah,
on a clothesline. And it's just so hard to deal with that. It's hard to see what's in it for you when the
right.
next day is going to be different. And then you have to figure out anew what's in it for me uh, in under different circumstances. And so that is very destructive of productivity. And with any change, as we've been talking about, you only become productive when you see how this is going to be good for you, the what's in it for me, how this is going to be good for me. Okay, I'm going to learn this new system. I'm going to learn how to deal with this new opportunity that management has put in my lap. I'm going to learn how to deal with return to office.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, maybe I'll get an apartment near the office,
Hmm.
whatever, and they learn how to work it, and then they become productive again. But
Yeah,
during that mid phase, it's rough. It's very rough on people, and it causes all sorts of side effects, turmoil, divorces,
yeah,
unhappiness, uh, people changing jobs because they can't see how they're going to work it. Um, it's a difficult period to get through.
right. Like my
And
friend, like I'm not able to commute 2.5 hours a day.
right.
And
So
it's
your
at
friend
that point, it's not
figured
worth
it out.
it. The value.
Yeah. And the RTO stuff is really disruptive when people have gotten very used to working from home. They've got their new schedule. They've got new time on their hands because they're not making that hour-long commute
Right.
or whatever it is, 2.5 hours. That's much worse. But,
Yeah.
in a lot of cities, it's an hour-long commute in the
Yeah.
morning. In Austin, it certainly is.
Uh-huh.
Um, and when you suddenly lose 2 hours a day just to commuting, and we don't have much light rail or
Public
public
transportation is
transportation in
much different in the
Austin.
United States than it is in Europe,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
And,
Yeah.
you can't just sit on the metro and read your email. Here, you got to drive your car, and you're not reading at the same time. Let's
Right.
hope. So,
Yeah, exactly. Even if you have an auto drive car, you still need to make sure your hands are on the wheel and your eyes are facing forward, right? Right.
yeah. So it's difficult to adjust to changes, and my heart goes out to all the people who are dealing with really
Big
disruptive
changes.
changes in their life.
Disruptive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It can take quite a toll because we like to be efficient in our lives. We like
Yeah.
efficiency. Our brains like efficiency. We're always trying to be productive and
Right. That's we
um,
feel good when we're productive.
right, right.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And so that's why, again, I'm a big fan of making small incremental changes, communicating along the way. And I think that's why um, it's good to be transparent. So a perfect example of this is Jimmy Bogart of AutoMapper. You know, he's had this maintained this open source project forever. He's got like 750 million downloads, right?
Wow.
And now he's not able to maintain it anymore because he doesn't have the support from his previous employer. He's been working on his consultancy, and so it's taken up a lot of his time, and it's just not possible for him to contribute anymore. But I think he's doing it the right way. He announces it. He wrote a big blog post about, this is what I'm thinking. I'm going to keep everybody informed. This is not going to be a fast, abrupt change. And now everybody's up in arms, like, how is this going to affect our business? How is this? Because so many people have built um, their stack using that, right? And
Hmm.
so I think that's the way to go, though, is small incremental changes and inform people along the way so they can gather data, they can have conversations, they can offer feedback, they can decide whether or not they're going to adopt this solution. Maybe they come up
Hmm.
with another solution or collaborate on a solution. And then at the end of the day, the change happens, but all
Yeah.
along the way you're stepping them through that process slowly toward the end, all the way to the follow up, and you have to know that you're not going to please everybody, right?
Hmm.
That's one thing. If you're in charge of driving that change, which I really don't think Jimmy cares, right? He's going to do what he's going to do. He's going to take everybody's information into account. He's going to understand that you can't please everybody, and I think he's going to be able to sleep just fine, as knowing that all
Hmm.
along the way he communicated and was transparent and made the best possible decision
Hmm.
for people, even though he knows he's not going to please everybody. I think
Yeah.
that sometimes people get in trouble when they try to please everybody,
Yeah.
right? I like
Even
I
when
I try to make it as win-win as possible, but it's not always going to happen.
yeah, even the simple things, well, not so simple, but moving a business from one office to another. You
Mm,
can't please everybody. Every some people are going to have longer commutes. Some
yeah,
people are going to have shorter commutes. That's a
yeah.
micro version of switching from work from home to work to return to office.
Well,
Uh,
here in Vegas, we had Tony Shea, who moved Zappos from Henderson into downtown Las Vegas, into the center. They opened in the old government building,
mhm,
and so that was a huge change. But then, not only that, he invested $350 million into our downtown area to revitalize it, to support startups, and then um, not only that, but then they moved toward a self-organizing organization,
mhm.
and they gave people over a I don't know, it may have even been a 5-year period. They stepped people through that process. They said, okay, look, we want to really move toward a self-organizing business. This is how we're going to do it. If you aren't in agreement with this, then we'll give you severance for every month that you've worked for us up until now. And a lot of people took that money and went and started their own businesses, their own startups, their own companies, their own
Mhm.
nonprofits. Um, and that was a really cool way, I think, to make the change for your entire company culture over several years, and to
Yeah.
honor the people who helped you get there and grow to begin with, um, based on the number of years they had worked, the number of months
It's
they had worked.
fascinating to follow the ecosystems that start, grow, and then sort of spread out.
Mm,
It's just fascinating.
mm,
So
yeah,
uh, I love watching that. And in Austin, we've been able to watch it just change and
yeah,
morph and expand for the betterment of so many people,
yeah,
new careers, new jobs, new fun things.
right.
Um, but that description that you just gave about Zappos, I mean, I love the idea that some people left and started their own companies and their
Yeah,
own nonprofits and their own whatevers.
yeah,
It's just fascinating. So great. I love that.
yeah, yeah. It's good. And I haven't been down there lately.
Hmm.
I'm a lot less involved in the Vegas tech scene than I was. But how interesting that, I talked to another, I was teaching a workshop. I don't remember. It may have been Thessaloniki, Greece. I was teaching a workshop. And also I've taught like on the East Coast. I remember I was in Boston, I think. And we were talking about how um, change happens and how long it can take to change over a workplace culture. And in my experience, it's about 5 years.
Yeah.
At a company like that, where you have a few thousand employees, it can
Hmm.
take that much time to slowly implement the changes, but it's totally worth it. When you talk to the people who stayed, they talk about how, you know before I didn't even know who to talk to down at human resources. Before, I didn't even know who in the IT department I could talk to. But then they implemented, for example, one thing that they implemented at Zappos was, you could trade out a department at the end of the day, the end of the month, the last day of the month. Everybody for that day could go shadow somebody in a different department. And a lot of people through that learned that they actually wanted to switch departments. And so you're using their skills and talents in a place where, in a department where they're going to be much more valuable, much more
Yeah.
creative, much more useful. And they didn't even know it because they had never experienced that department before.
Yeah.
So that's one example. But also, people talk about how, before, the communication sucked, and once they get into that changeover, our communication improved, because slowly, through incremental changes and through trial and error and following that system consistently, and through transparency and telling everybody, look, here's where we are, this is where our goal is, and when we're trying to meet, then slowly and consistently the changes will happen in a much more sustainable way. And
Yeah.
everybody who stays is everybody who um, uh, was able to adopt that change. And everybody who goes, hopefully, they were honored by being paid severance by every month that they worked. It's not always that way, of course, but it's a lot less chaotic when
Yeah.
that happens, when you're transparent, when you communicate, when you slowly make the changes and get the feedback and then reiterate.
Well, you just hit upon a couple things that are so important: transparency
Mm,
and reduced chaos. Those are so important to helping people through a change. And it's just, so difficult for people when there is chaos and there is a lack of transparency. And so many companies and governments
yeah,
don't have the lack of chaos and the transparency that
yeah.
helps people get through it. And so people have a hard time seeing where they fit.
Mm,
They feel like they aren't in control of their lives.
right. There's
Whereas
the loss of agency.
the description you just gave at Zappos gave people a lot of agency.
Hmm.
They got to try out new things. And if they did decide to leave, that was okay. They were going to get rewarded for their
Right.
service. But without agency, without a little bit of control, as much as you can have, it's just so much harder for people. So
Yeah.
there's lots of things that maybe we can talk about next time that
Yeah.
people can do to help them get through change.
And of
So
course, on next Friday, we have our monthly workshop. So people can go get tickets at luckyandleslie.com. They're $27. And we role play these types of conversations, and doesn't ask you. And you worked really hard for those hours of that schedule with your old boss. And now your new boss is like, okay, everybody return to work. Or, all right, this is your new schedule. What happens when your project changes? What
yeah,
happens when the salesperson oversells a new feature, and now you suddenly, that changes your deadline? So
Yeah.
we role play those conversations, and luckyandleslie.com, you can go, or you can see us at an upcoming conference. We have applied to a couple of tech conferences this year, so you might see us. We're
Might
still
catch us
waiting
at a conference. Yeah.
on some of those. Yeah, yeah,
Or
exactly.
invite us to come to your conference,
There
whatever.
you
We'd
go.
be happy to do that role playing with you
Yep,
on site. So
yep,
it's fun.
absolutely.
A lot of fun.
Cool. Well, I will talk to you later then. We'll see you next week, Leslie, at this time, Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Central and 7 a.m. Pacific.
Hasta luego.
All right. See you. Bye.
Bye bye.